Tonight, federal agents have dismantled what we believe to be the most dangerous foreign-backed criminal fortress ever constructed on American soil.
At 11:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement stood before a packed briefing room in Washington, D.C., and made a statement that sent shockwaves through every intelligence agency in the Western Hemisphere. Tonight, federal agents have dismantled what we believe to be the most dangerous foreign-backed criminal fortress ever constructed on American soil. Minneapolis, Minnesota, a city of lakes and bridges, a city where trust was supposed to mean something. But beneath the surface, something else had been growing, something that turned neighborhoods into no-go zones, that turned community leaders into warlords, and that turned American streets into extensions of foreign war zones. This is the story of how a rogue Somali militia network, backed by Venezuelan intelligence operatives and funded through Iranian shadow accounts, built a criminal empire so vast it controlled entire sections of an American city. This is the story of Operation Shattered Crescent, and what you're about to hear is worse than anything you imagined. 4:32 a.m., Cedar Riverside neighborhood, Minneapolis, Minnesota. The streets are silent. Fog rolls off the Mississippi River and clings to the pavement like a blanket soaking up secrets. Streetlights flicker over boarded-up storefronts and apartment towers where curtains never open during the day. This is the heart of what federal agents have been calling the Somali Fortress, a 3-block radius where local police stopped patrolling years ago, where 911 calls go unanswered, where even fire trucks need armed escorts. And tonight, that fortress is about to fall. At exactly 4:32 a.m., over 200 federal agents move in coordinated silence through the pre-dawn darkness. ICE tactical units, FBI hostage rescue team operators, DEA strike squads, DHS intelligence analysts riding in armored Suburbans, SWAT teams from Minneapolis and St. Paul, finally given federal clearance to enter zones their own departments had abandoned. They hit 6 locations simultaneously: an apartment complex on Cedar Avenue that doubled as a human trafficking processing center, a halal grocery store on Riverside Avenue with a basement full of counterfeit documents, fake passports, and forged green cards, a community center on 15th Avenue South that functioned as a weapons cache and tactical command post, a row of townhouses near the university that served as safe houses for foreign operatives rotating in and out of the country, a shipping warehouse in the industrial zone along the river where containers arrived weekly from overseas, packed with everything from AK-47 rifle parts to encrypted satellite communication systems, and finally, the crown jewel, a fortified 3-story building on the corner of 7th Street, surrounded by security cameras, reinforced steel doors, and armed guards who weren't just protecting bugs. They were protecting something far more valuable: information. The breach begins with flashbang. Blinding white light splits the darkness. Agents in black fatigues pour through shattered doorways like a flood breaking through a dam. Suspects scatter. Some try to run with duffel bags stuffed with cash. Others grab laptops and external hard drive, desperately trying to wipe data before the feds can seize it. Gunfire erupts on the 2nd floor of the main building. 2 militia guards open fire with automatic weapons. Federal agents return fire. Within seconds, both guards are down. The rest surrender. Inside the main fortress building, agents find what they came for: rows of server racks humming in a climate-controlled back room. Steel lockboxes stacked floor to ceiling, each one filled with documents, ledgers, and USB drives. Over 400 kilograms of heroin and fentanyl, packaged and ready for distribution across the Midwest. 73 illegal firearms, including fully automatic rifles and rocket-propelled grenade launchers. And in the center of it all, sitting calmly at a desk with his hands folded, a man federal agents have been hunting for over 2 years. His name is Alejandro Maduro, not the Venezuelan president, but his cousin, a former intelligence officer with Venezuela's SEBIN agency, trained in psychological operations, surveillance, and asymmetric warfare. And according to the encrypted communications agents are about to crack, he wasn't just visiting Minneapolis, he was running it. One agent leans over the desk and reads a line from an open document on Maduro's laptop. Phase 3, integration complete. Minneapolis hub operational, awaiting final authorization for nationwide expansion. The agent looks up. Sir, you need to see this. 7:14 a.m., FBI Cyber Forensics Division, Minneapolis Field Office. Analysts are already pulling data from the seized servers. The encryption is military grade. But the FBI has tools that can crack military grade. By 9 a.m., they have a full picture. And it's worse than anyone expected. The operation had a code name, Project Nomad Horizon. It wasn't just about drugs. It wasn't just about guns. It was about creating a parallel governance system inside American cities, using displaced populations, foreign operatives, and complicit local officials to build autonomous zones that answered to no one. The financial web was staggering. Shell companies registered in Delaware, Wyoming, and Nevada. offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Dubai, and Turkey. Fake nonprofit organizations with names like New American Relief Fund and Global Refugee Assistance Coalition, all of them funneling money from Iranian front companies into the Minneapolis network. Real estate holdings purchased through ghost buyers, over 40 properties across Minneapolis and St. Paul, all owned by entities that traced back to the same encrypted signature, Governor Elliott Varon. Well, a fictional name, but the power behind it was real. Varon had served 2 terms as a state legislator before winning the governor's office in a landslide. He campaigned on inclusion, on compassion, on opening Minnesota's doors to those fleeing violence and oppression. Noble words, but the digital evidence told a different story. Encrypted emails between Varon's chief of staff and known Venezuelan intelligence operatives. Wire transfer authorizations signed with Varon's private digital key, moving state grant funds into accounts controlled by the Somali militia network. Detailed logistics plans for expanding the Fortress model into other Midwestern cities: Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Cleveland. And most damning of all, a memo dated 14 months earlier that laid out the strategy in cold, clinical language. Minnesota will serve as the staging ground. Once integration is complete, the model will be replicated. Refugee resettlement programs provide cover. State and federal funding provide resources. Local law enforcement will be neutralized through political pressure and selective corruption. By 2028, we will control 6 major metropolitan areas. This is not infiltration. This is engineered transformation. One FBI analyst stares at the screen and whispers a single word: treason. But the evidence doesn't stop there. Agents find detailed maps of every ICE detention facility in the region. They find lists of federal agents, complete with home addresses, vehicle descriptions, and family member names. They find intercepted communications showing that ICE raids had been leaked in advance at least 19 times over the past 18 months, allowing high-value targets to escape hours before arrests. And they find something even more chilling: a file labeled Executive Action List, 800 names, men and women marked for elimination. Former militia members who tried to leave, Somali community leaders who spoke out against the network, local journalists who asked too many questions, federal informants, undercover agents, 800 executions, planned, funded, and authorized. And according to the timeline in the file, Phase 1 was supposed to begin in 72 hours. An agent turns to his supervisor. "We just stopped a massacre." 11:00 a.m. Federal Command Center, Minneapolis, St. Paul Joint Operations Base. A massive digital map covers the wall. Red markers pulse across dozens of locations throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois. Each marker represents a property, a business, a safe house, or a logistics hub tied to Project Nomad Horizon. At the center of the room stands Assistant Director Marcus Tyndall, a 30-year veteran of ICE operations who has seen cartels, smuggling rings, and terror cells, but nothing like this. He speaks into a secure radio channel that connects over 1,400 federal agents across 4 states. "This is command. All units, you are greenlit for synchronized entry. We go in 60 seconds. No one runs, no one hides, we take it all." 60 seconds later, the largest coordinated federal operation in Midwest history begins. Black Hawk helicopters lift off from staging areas and sweep low over the Twin Cities, their rotors hammering the morning air. Armored vehicles roll through neighborhoods that haven't seen law enforcement presence in years. SWAT teams breach doors in Detroit, Chicago, and Milwaukee simultaneously, hitting properties that investigators traced back to the same financial network. In Minneapolis alone, agents hit over 30 locations the first 2 hours. A drug super lab hidden inside a shuttered meatpacking plant near the stockyards, producing fentanyl pills by the hundred of thousands. A human trafficking transit house in the suburbs where women and children were held in locked rooms before being moved to other cities. A document forgery operation running out of a print shop, churning out fake social security cards, driver's licenses, and work permits. A weapons depot buried in a storage unit facility, containing enough firepower to arm a small insurgent force. A migrant smuggling convoy intercepted on Interstate 94, with 42 people crammed into the back of a refrigerated truck, including 16 children under the age of 10. At each location, agents seize more evidence, more servers, more ledgers, more names. They arrest cartel couriers, militia enforcers, document forgers, and human traffickers. But they also arrest people no one expected. A deputy chief of the Minneapolis Police Department, caught trying to flee his home with a go bag containing $200,000 in cash and 3 foreign passports. A county judge who had dismissed over 60 criminal cases tied to the network, all of them involving suspects who should have been deported. A state transportation official who authorized the shutdown of way stations along key smuggling routes, allowing convoys to pass without inspection. And finally, at 2:47 p.m., federal agents execute a warrant at the governor's mansion in St. Paul. Governor Elliott Varron is placed in handcuffs on his own front lawn, in front of a crowd of reporters and cameras that ICE made sure were present. By the time the sun sets, the operation has seized over 900 kilograms of narcotics, including heroin, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine, over 400 illegal firearms, $12 million in cash, 27 vehicles, including armored SUVs and cargo vans modified with hidden compartments, and more than 200 suspects in custody. An ICE spokesperson steps in front of the cameras and delivers a statement that will be replayed on every news network in the country. What we dismantled today was not just a criminal network. It was a shadow government. It was a deliberate, organized attempt to create foreign-controlled zones inside the United States, using our own systems, our own resources, and our own laws against us. That ends now. The underworld took more damage in 12 hours than it had in the last 12 years. 6:30 p.m., ICE Intelligence Analysis Center, Minneapolis. Investigators are deep into the seized data, and the more they read, the darker it gets. The corruption didn't just reach into local government. It had infected law enforcement at every level. Patrol grids had been altered to avoid certain neighborhoods. Surveillance cameras had been deactivated during key smuggling windows. Internal ICE raid schedules had been leaked to the network at least 23 times, allowing high-value targets to vanish hours before agents arrived. One investigator pulls up a chat log between a Minneapolis police sergeant and a militia lieutenant. The sergeant writes, "Next raid is Thursday, 5 a.m., Cedar Avenue. Move your people." The lieutenant replies, "Understood. Payment transferred." The sergeant was paid $12,000 for selling out his own city. Honest officers, the ones who didn't know their colleagues were compromised, sat in the briefing room and listened as investigators walked them through the betrayal. Some cried. Others sat in stunned silence. One veteran ICE agent, a 23-year operator who had served in war zones and taken down some of the most dangerous smugglers in the hemisphere, stood up and said what everyone was thinking. "We weren't just fighting a militia. We were fighting our own people." Federal agents arrested 9 law enforcement officials that evening: sergeants, detectives, border agents, and one senior ICE supervisor who had been feeding intelligence to the network for over 3 years. The badge would be rebuilt, but it would take time, and it would take accountability. 9:15 p.m., secure briefing room, Department of Homeland Security Headquarters, Washington, D.C. Senior officials from ICE, FBI, DEA, DHS, and the National Security Council gather around a classified briefing. The map on the screen is no longer focused on Minneapolis. It's focused on the entire country. Agents have traced the financial and logistics network across state lines. The Somali Fortress in Minneapolis was just the pilot program. The network had already begun expanding. Safe houses in Detroit and Dearborn, logistics hubs in Chicago and Gary, Indiana, document forgery rings in Columbus and Cleveland, human trafficking routes running through Milwaukee and Green Bay. The system was designed to move people, money, drugs, and weapons across the Midwest without ever triggering federal alerts. Shipping manifests were falsified, weigh stations were bypassed, trucking contractors on the network's payroll moved cargo that was never inspected, and the volume was staggering. According to the logistics files seized from the servers, the network was moving an estimated 300 kilograms of narcotics per week through the Midwest corridor. Fentanyl pills, heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine, all of it distributed through street-level crews that had no idea they were working for a foreign-backed operation. But narcotics were just one revenue stream. Human trafficking brought in millions more. Men, women, and children smuggled into the country and sold into labor, domestic servitude, or worse. The network charged between $8,000 and $15,000 per person, depending on the route and the destination. Over the past 2 years, investigators estimate the network smuggled over 4,000 people into the United States. Many of them are still missing. And then there was the final file, the one that made every person in the briefing room go silent. It was titled Phase 4: Continental Integration. The plan wasn't just to control cities. It was to create a permanent, self-sustaining parallel system that could operate indefinitely, shielded by political allies, funded by foreign governments, and protected by a network of corrupted officials who would ensure federal agencies could never touch it. Governor Varron's encrypted notes spelled it out clearly. Minnesota is the model. Once Phase 4 is operational, replication begins. We will have autonomous zones in 12 states within 5 years. Federal authority will be irrelevant. We are not infiltrating the system. We are replacing it. One NSC analyst stared at the screen and said what everyone was thinking. They weren't building a criminal network. They were building a nation within a nation. The arrests didn't stop. Over the next 72 hours, federal agents executed warrants in 8 states. They arrested over 300 suspects. They dismantled smuggling routes that had been operating for years. They seized enough fentanyl to kill millions of people. And they stopped 800 planned executions. 800 lives saved because agents found a file on a laptop in a fortified building in Minneapolis. But the real cost of Project Nomad Horizon can't be measured in arrests or seizures. It's measured in the communities that were destroyed, in the families torn apart by addiction, by violence, by fear, in the neighborhoods that became war zones because their own government stopped protecting them, in the officers who served with honor only to discover that their colleagues had sold them out, in the trust that was shattered when people realized that the systems built to protect them had been turned against them. Power doesn't always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it just asks for silence and ambition and the belief that no one will ever notice. But someone always notices, and when the truth comes out, it comes out fast. Alejandro Maduro is currently being held in a federal supermax facility, facing charges of conspiracy, terrorism, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and acting as an unregistered foreign agent. Governor Elliott Varron has been charged with treason, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit murder. His trial is set to begin in 6 months. The Somali Fortress in Minneapolis is gone. The network that stretched across the Midwest is dismantled. The shadow government that tried to replace the real one has been dragged into light. But the fight isn't over, because for every network that gets exposed, there are others still operating in silence, still building, still waiting. If you're still watching this, tap like so more people see this story. Share it with someone who needs to know what's really happening in our cities. Comment "expose" if you believe corruption like this should be dragged into the light and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.